All right. Greetings, everyone. My name is Alex Forrester, and on behalf of the board and the incredible staff of the Schumacher Center for New Economics, I am proud to welcome everyone here this afternoon. Thank you for being with us. We have a very special event today, continuing a tradition that stretches back to the very beginning of this storied organization. In October of 1981, the very first Annual E.F. Schumacher Lecture was delivered by none other than Wendell Berry, Wes Jackson, and Hazel Henderson. Theirs was a prescient opening message, evoking themes of people, land, and community, and inaugurating a thread of reflection and conversation that has continued unabated now for over 45 years. Leading figures like Jane Jacobs, Thomas Berry, Winona LaDuke, Bill McKibben, and so many others have stood up here as part of this community and shared deeply from their experience and their foresight, calling us to stand up, to pay attention, to get involved. Their lectures, each recorded and published, are available for generations of others to read and draw inspiration. You can find them on our website and displayed prominently in our Schumacher Library just up the road from here. Continuing this tradition, we are here today to welcome a new pair of voices into this story, and I couldn't be more excited. Samantha Power and Tyler Wakefield have accepted the call to join us today to speak on the promise of bioregional economies. To help us to introduce Samantha and Tyler, I'd like to invite my friend, colleague, and hero, Matt Stinchcomb, to the stage. Matt, would you come up here? Now, before you begin, Matt, I actually want to take a quick moment to say something about you. For more than a decade, the Schumacher Center has had the immense privilege to be led by Matt as the chair of our board of trustees. During that time, Matt, you have been a rock, a leading light, pushing the organization and its vision forward while ensuring that it had the resources and the capacity to do so. You steered the organization through rocky waters and over mountains high and low. You positioned it for great things, even as you yourself are doing great things in your own work. Recently, you made the call to make a change to your role here at Schumacher. You're not leaving the board, and for that we are grateful. But stepping back from your role as board chair to focus on the growing scope of important activities you're pursuing at Partners for Climate Action in support of a flourishing regional future. As part of this change, I have the honor of inheriting your mantle here as board chair, and I want to take this moment to publicly recognize and thank you on behalf of the organization and the extended community for your hard work, long hours, and your many years of vision and leadership. Now, our children both go to the Hawthorne Valley School, and each year at the beginning of the year during the rose ceremony, the teachers exchange gifts with each other as they take up the baton of a new year. And so I thought it might be a fitting opportunity to offer you a gift in this moment to say thank you. Now, unfortunately, the real item is still in transit up from Kentucky, but I'm excited to say that we have a framed and signed poem by Wendell Berry on its way to you. It speaks of the mad farmer and the vision that keeps him going, setting out each day under an almost forgotten but ever staying light. In the meantime, I'm presenting you with a copy of the poem and a book by Thomas Berry as a small token of affection and appreciation for all you mean to us and to me. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'll bring it back to the seat for you.
Well, thank you very much. That was very unexpected. So I'm very touched. So thank you all. I thought I was just introducing Samantha and Tyler. So thank you, Alex. That's really, really very kind. So I'm Matt, and yes, as Alex said, I've had the privilege of serving on the Schumacher board for the last, I think, 13 or 14 years. It's been a minute. And I'm very grateful and honored to have been involved and to continue to be involved with this great organization. But today I'm very pleased to welcome Samantha Power and Tyler Wakefield, co-founders of the BioFi Project, a think and do tank that aims to seed a new category of financial institutions rooted in place, reciprocity, and planetary repair. And I can attest firsthand to the depth of their thinking, connections, facilitation skills, as I had the good fortune and honor to participate alongside dozens of others organizing teams developing bioregional financing facilities in the BioFi Cultivator Project's the cultivator that they had this past year. I've also had the great pleasure of beginning to get to know Tyler and Samantha and have been so impressed by their kindness, compassion, and genuine desire to build a truly regenerative future for all living beings and places. I know I gained a great deal from these two, and I know you will too. So they're going to be speaking together today, so I'm going to just say a little bit about their pasts and their work that they're doing. I'll start with Samantha, since you're right here first in my notes. So Samantha, as mentioned, is the co-founder and director of the BioFi Project, and the co-author, along with Leon Seafield, of Bioregional Financing Facilities, Reimagining Finance to Regenerate Our Planet. That book was very informative to me, and as our organization's been working to build a fund for the Hudson Valley, I learned about your work. I was like, hey, that's exactly what we're trying to do, and someone's laid it all out for us. This is great. So again, very pleased to have been able to participate in the cultivator that you two did. For over 10 years, Samantha has pursued one central question. How do we change where money flows so it supports rather than destroys life? That inquiry has taken her from disappearing rainforests in Southeast Asia to women's lending circles in Myanmar, and from the US Treasury to the World Bank. At the World Bank, she spent 5 years publishing research and advising governments, central banks, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity Secretariat, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and major investors on how to bend the curve of nature loss. All of that work now coming to bear in the work that she and Tyler do with the BioFi Project. Tyler, also very impressive in his own right and a wonderful person, is a systems designer, facilitator, interstitial togetherness weaver, and community tender devoted to cultivating trust, joyful coordination, and hyper-local to global economies that serve life. Guided by a call to weave biocultural coherence and coordination across human communities and the more than human life community, Tyler studies and facilitates within and between a variety of intellectual, spiritual, and professional communities across the regenerative, bioregional, metamodern, liminal web, and systems transformation spaces. Please put your hands together in welcoming Samantha and Tyler to the Schumacher Lectures this year.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It is such an honor to be here. Thank you to Susan and the Schumacher Center for inviting us and organizing all the details to make today happen. Thank you to our colleague Felix, who is not here with us today, but has been working hard and making sure we have some very cool slides that we're excited to show you today. And before we get started, we want to share our why with you and hold that all together in our time today. Our why is life. We are here today in service to life on this sacred garden planet that all of us have been blessed to be born into at this crazy moment in time. Our scientific understanding of life has been deeply informed and inspired by the work of scientists Lynn Margulis, James Lovelock, Fridolf Capra, Umberto Maturana, Gregory Bateson, and many others. They describe life as a self-organizing, self-maintaining network of relationships that continuously transforms energy, matter, and information. They show us how life exists as a dynamic, interdependent process that thrives through cooperative symbioses that weave individuals into larger living systems across scales of space and time. They show us how it is creative, regenerative, and often mysterious. We have chosen to dedicate our lives and the life force flowing through each of us and our relationship to birthing a life-aligned culture and life-aligned economies. And that is what we will be sharing about with you today. However, we're first going to take you on a bit of a journey that mirrors our own journey, being with all the complexity, confusion, beauty, and possibility of the world today.
This afternoon, we gather amidst a global civilizational context that I believe many of us in this room have been working hard, perhaps over decades, perhaps in the past few years, to try and come to terms with. Probably many, many terms, actually. These might include polycrisis, metacrisis, breakdown, collapse, release phase of the Hollings adaptive cycle, runaway, decoherence, compost heap, Kali Yuga, Pachacuti, the Great Turning, Summer's End, prophecies of the rising waters, shifting earth, Spider-Woman's web, 7 fires, time of no fish, water buffalo, and Nepantla and consequence. Anthropologists and bioregionalists alike can sometimes be heard saying that Western English speakers, Americans in particular, are so culturally impoverished. How we lack the dozens of words for snow like the Inuit, or all those the Hopi have for varieties of corn, or the 96 words for love in Sanskrit. Yet to this dismissal of our culture, I say, look at how creative, nuanced, and observant we are in precisely describing our time of peril. This must be a brilliant example of our unique form of cultural wealth, right? This must offer us some form of intimate clarity with which we can better navigate the particularities of daily life. I wish it were so. Sometimes it seems that the more terms I digest, the further I feel from any trustworthy comprehension of what is actually occurring and what might be helpful ways of holding it all. And exactly who is the I doing such holding? Let me tell a brief story. So a little over a month ago, Samantha and I received a very simple email from the legendary Susan Witt, co-founder and executive director of the outstanding Schumacher Center for New Economics. She asked, simply, would you two like to give the 45th Annual E.F. Schumacher Lecture? At this time, however, I was staring ahead in some form of low-grade terror towards my 30th birthday, which was soon to arrive in mid-November. Terror because in gazing towards this milestone, a milestone I always imagined would demarcate some threshold of clarity, of arrival, of confidence in who I am, how the world works, and what it is. I was realizing I had absolutely no clue, and I felt like clarity was melting away each day that I grew closer to this date. Thus, I hope you can understand that receiving Susan's simple invitation to speak to you all today felt like a brilliant practical joke from the cosmos. You want me to do what? Offer promises of bioregional economies at a time like this? I may have completed my Saturn return, Susan, but I'm not sure Saturn returns work like they used to. Not in a meta-crisis. Knowing that I couldn't possibly let Samantha or Susan down by backing out, I did what any reasonable person would do in my position. I anxiously, urgently, zealously streamed all 12 hours of bioeconomist talks that the Schumacher Center has on their YouTube channel. Oh, how seductive you are, Brother Bio. How you trick me again and again into thinking I might be able to find something useful to grab a hold of in your erudite swagger. Instead, you leave me perplexed and puzzled, pondering how I might be able to find a post-human somewhere and convince Samantha and Susan to let them give this talk instead of me. I'm only half joking. I listened to a few hours, not 12, but the result was the same. Boy, was I lost. In this soup of egoic disorientation, I reached out one more time for help, now to Schumacher, E.F. Schumacher himself. I loved Small is Beautiful back in college, so I figured he must have other gifts of clarity for my moment of desperation. Lo and behold, what did I find? His 172-page book, A Guide for the Perplexed. Now I was really saved, or so I thought. While the Daily Mail's endorsement may be right that Schumacher's Guide was, quote, the most exciting philosophical book for ages, I remained, despite my frantic read, perplexed. Samantha, on the other hand, bless her heart, had a little more clarity about what she wanted to say.
I come to this work as part of my dharma, like many of you, from a place of deep gratitude to and devotion to Gaia. Gratitude waking up each morning to be alive in this, yes, this wild and crazy time, and to be in community with so many of you. Like a lot of you, I have tried a range of different paths in an attempt to support healing in this broken world. And one thing that often differentiates me from other folks working in the new economics or bioregional space is that I have worked in some legacy institutions, rooted in, built out of, and continuing to uphold a neoliberal globalist paradigm rooted in a mechanistic and reductionist worldview. Namely, the World Bank, where I spent more than 5 years working on climate and nature finance. After some time trying to shift where money was flowing through my work with ministries of finance, central banks, some of the world's largest institutional investors, various UN bodies, the G20, and more, I realized the change I longed for was not going to happen from changing where money was flowing from the top down. I realized the importance of working with place-based teams coming together to regenerate whole bioregions over decades and even centuries. I realized I wanted to support them to build transformational, synergistic portfolios of projects and to resource them in a way that eventually allows those projects and the whole bioregions that they're supporting an off-ramp from the global capitalist system. I am now blessed beyond my wildest dreams to be working in this think and do tank called the BioFi Project with Tyler by my side. The project is built on the book that Matt mentioned that I co-authored, and while so many other changes have taken place in the world since the project and the book launched, my clarity that the creation of bioregional financing facilities and bioregional economies is my work to do in this moment has only sharpened. While I don't hold doubt about the what, I do have lots of doubts about whether what we're doing will be enough or fast enough, or whether those are even the right questions. More on that later. In our work, and Tyler and I's romantic partnership, when there are tensions in our views or a gap in shared clarity, I trust that there's intelligence present. And it informs the work that we do, deepens our relationship, and brings us into more rigorous inquiry together. And from all of that, we evolve and hopefully are better of service as a result. Life with Tyler is an adventure, and I knew that writing this lecture would be too, and it certainly was.
So, how does one person itching to share a clear vision in one confused puddle of primordial soup find a way to create an intelligible lecture together? With hardship, frustration, fear, pain, tears, but also with apologies, forgiveness, laughter, hugs, encouragement, and celebration. And now, don't tell anyone about this, because we don't want folks to find out there is some real Eros feeding this work, but there were kisses too. Beyond the care of holding each other through cycles of death and rebirth, as well as clarity and confusion, we found our task was to let go of all we assumed we knew, the terms, the data, the books, the news headlines, and begin again, to look as clearly and non-reactively as we could at what this world seems to be, what seems to be happening in these times, and piece by piece, day by day, attempt to formulate some story, some true yet partial gesture of meaning that allows us to relate to it all. This is a full-bodied process, made flexible and spacious by deep grieving, and curious and courageous by listening to the visionary wisdom of heartbreak. And it's a many-bodied process. We are so privileged to be in cooperative relationship with so many brave and brilliant souls serving their communities and openly sharing their evolving sense-making and wisdom. Any temporary clarity we've pieced together is thanks to heartfelt connections of trust with friends, colleagues, and mentors, including many of you in this room. We hope our talk this afternoon can invite you into a similar process and inspire many conversations with those you trust. So, let us begin. In looking at the world and economy with fresh minds, Samantha and I gathered a reality check, data and graphs that might inform our understanding of where we've been traveling, where we are now, and where we might be headed as a global economy and civilization. For some of you, none of this will be new. For others, it might bring surprise and challenge. Regardless, I invite us to practice greeting this information from a beginner's mind. Can we bring a quality of awareness that creates more spaciousness and possibility than our usual patterns of reaction? Can we stay curious about the emotions that arise and the meanings our minds automatically make from lines and numbers on a screen? I don't know what is going on in this world exactly, but I do know our ability to be together in presence and non-judgmental curiosity amidst confusion and chaos is an invaluable resource that expands the precious possibility space for wise action. So let us practice. We're aware of a series of exponential curves indicating that throughout our Earth systems, we are depleting resources faster than ever, we are polluting faster than ever, and the trends just keep growing. We know that from the 1960s to now, we've steadily increased our consumption of toxic pesticides. Our fertilizer consumption has done the same. We've crossed 7 out of 9 planetary boundaries that the Stockholm Resilience Center has identified. Our plastics production continues to rise exponentially. The mass of materials made by man, made by humans, has now exceeded all living biomass. The Living Planet Index, which tracks populations of wildlife, has been steadily decreasing. And interestingly, though, there are some parts of the world where at least the mammals seem to be making a comeback. Yet on the whole, we still know we're in what some are calling a 6th mass extinction. You can see how the beginnings of this compare to what have been the previous 5 mass extinctions in Earth's history. We are consuming more energy than ever before, and despite the rise of renewables, we are still consuming more and more fossil fuels year over year. Our CO2 emissions continue to rise. We have crossed the 1.5 degree threshold outlined in the Paris Agreement as the point at which we need to stay under to avoid catastrophe. And we're starting to see scientists predict the collapse of ocean currents that regulate the hydrological cycles and climate of the Earth. The people, often indigenous folks, defending land from extraction and theft, are being killed and disappeared, largely in the global south. And the militaries of the world are spending more each year. Trust in the United States government and other governments is on the decline. Interpersonal trust in the United States, those who agree with the statement, most people can be trusted, has been in a steady decline as well, now hovering about 35%. And while the share of people around the world who are undernourished has been decreasing over the last 2 decades, the overall population of folks who are food insecure continues to rise due to rising populations. Getting close to the end here, this is a chart from 1946 to 2024 showing in the shaded areas the volume of conflicts, and then the black line showing the number of casualties or deaths. We see a gradual increase in volume of conflicts and a recent spike in deaths. We see more people over the past 10 years becoming forcibly displaced. We see mental illness being diagnosed at rising rates in US undergraduates. And this one, despite all this, people seem relatively happy, according to this data. In the US, about 90% of people say they're happy or rather happy, and that's matched by many other countries, both in the global north and the global south. Thank you for being here with us today. I know that's a lot. Can we take a breath? Can we take the best breath we've taken all week? Can we honor what our bodies and what our group body is going through in this time? My and Samantha's promise today is to offer you our best story of what we see going on and what potential futures may lie ahead, and to give some big hugs at the reception to anyone who's a hugger. So let's get to it. In recent months, we've heard from friends and colleagues who have been carefully tracking the data, the politics, the financial and military chess moves with a lot more patience than us. And we've heard that nation states are losing legitimacy, slipping into authoritarianism in a race to the bottom. We've heard that ideology, data, and billionaire capital are converging into private empires, uninhibited by the reins of nation states. We've heard aspiring emperors are amassing not just financial fortune or military power, but ownership of the information systems on which those powers operate. The AI cat is out of the bag, we've heard. Coordination towards non-catastrophic AI has failed, and we are decidedly caught in a multipolar trap. On top of this, the nuclear safety experts say that they're more concerned than they've ever been. Amidst my own existential crisis and confrontation with my beautiful smallness, I haven't known what to make of these stories of existential risk and power asymmetry, or what to do with them, except allow grief to wash over me, turn me in its tides, and lay me on the shore to begin anew, where I can ask, what might be mine to do? Led by this question, I reached again for Schumacher. This time, his 1979 book, Good Work, which I thankfully found some things to help me orient to these times. In Good Work, he asks, why should industrial society fail? Why should the spiritual evils it produces lead to worldly failure? He answered that industrial society disrupts the organic relationships that once kept population and subsistence in balance. It damages the very systems that sustain life through poison and adulteration, and it rapidly drains non-renewable resources. In doing so, it degrades the moral and intellectual qualities of man while further developing a highly complicated way of life. And it breeds a violence against nature, which can at any moment turn into violence against one's fellow men. He concluded that no political or economic reform, scientific advance, or technological progress could solve the life and death problems of industrial society. His view matches that of Nate Hagens, who in his sobering yet playful 2020 paper, Economics of the Future Beyond the Superorganism, closely examines the pernicious relationship between abundant credit and fossil fuel extraction. He argues powerfully that our global economy races forward uncontrollably thanks to the illusory premise that ever-increasing amounts of cheap credit will be able to flow into extracting ever-increasing amounts of cheap, high-quality fossil fuels and raw materials. we, along with Schumacher and Huygens, believe that we have entered a form of runaway in which there is no conceivable strategy for wresting back control. The question now is not if, only when and how we will return back home after our fantasy of energy blindness and infinite credit catches up with us and is integrated into our financial markets. Huygens writes, "The real challenge will begin when growth ends. Eventually, we likely face a global depression and other challenging departures from our recent trajectory. The word collapse imbues a finality. It also sounds binary, yes or no. Our situation is much more nuanced, geographically dispersed, and actionable." We agree with his forecast of and prescription for what he calls the Great Simplification. In coming decades, he says, we need to physically and psychologically prepare for circumstances with less credit, complexity, energy/material throughput, and will need social support structures for those falling off the treadmill. But to make sure we're not just jumping to conclusions, perhaps it's wise to see what the hardcore complexity scientists think of this moment. Who are the PhDs innovating beyond the 1972 Limits to Growth study and 2023's 50-year update, which doubled down on its original findings? Enter the Cascade Institute with their Polycrisis Core Model, the PCM for short. Using cross-impact balance analysis, this model integrates thousands of qualitative judgments about causal relationships among these 11 global systems to predict the world's future states. It generates over 4 million possible outcomes for 2040, but only 3 form highly stable attractors, states with gravitational pull that draw in less stable possibilities. The largest of these they call illiberal decline. This represents what they describe as a future of poverty, inequality, authoritarianism, violence, and environmental degradation, acting like a cosmological black hole, absorbing over 3 million outcomes. Another major attractor, Mad Max, reflects thoroughgoing social, economic, and environmental collapse and deeply entrenched human misery. But wait, the story is not over. What about that third attractor, the one they deem remarkably good, and that in our conversations with them have suggested kind of seems like a bioregional future? It's comparatively tiny, but highly stable, they say. It entails an enormous improvement in human well-being. It has strong democracy, competent governance, guided economic growth, relative economic equality, sustained technological innovation, and declining environmental impact. To this I say, what more evidence could you possibly ask for that the cosmos itself is a drama and that it too has a soft spot for a good underdog story? These are PhDs, folks. Unfortunately, though, I can understand why Cascade Institute marks us so close to the decline attractor, given how easy it is to find examples of death, decay, and decline around us already. But the fascinating thing is the irony here, that as part of this death process in our ecosystems, in our hydrological cycles, in our trust in institutions, that as part of this death process, and culture itself becoming aware of this process, we also see that the beliefs that brought us to this precipice are fraying, are loosening, are unwinding. Beyond stories of death, we're also witnessing the death of stories themselves. Modernity's narrative of progress and techno-optimism, American exceptionalism, what David Bollier and Silke Helfrich call the modern West's Onto story, which means the isolated autonomous individual, humanity's separation from nature, and the market as life's natural organizing principle. We're also seeing the collapse of neo-Darwinian tales of hyper-competition, human exceptionalism, and even humanism, along with the wobbling of Western epistemologies, its knowledge hierarchies, and its mechanistic Cartesian and reductionistic metaphysics. We are, as philosopher of education Dr. Zach Stein offers, in a time between worlds, perhaps also a time between stories. Zach and colleagues at the Center for World Philosophy and Religion frame this moment as a penetrable opening, a time of kairos rather than the familiar linear clock time of chronos. They write, "On the inside of kairos are portals to new worlds and nonlinear influxes of creativity, disruptions, and opportunity. Kairos is the time within time, pregnant moments when the unimaginable is imagined and the impossible becomes actual." In this confusing, chaotic, yet extremely exciting time between worlds, where death seems to make space for life and where accessing portals to new worlds somehow feels more possible than ever, how are we to find clarity on what is wise action, knowing that we are still entangled in the very patterns and systems we are trying to move beyond? As Dr. Vanessa Andreotti might remind us, this time calls not just for the creation of the new, but a careful, a curious, and appreciative hospicing of what is dying. Let us not rush towards these portals to new worlds, blinded by the ecstasy of believing ourselves capable of escaping that which we critique. Before Samantha and I explore stories of a more beautiful future and how we might get there, we think it's important to sit for a moment with just how compromised we are. We are contextually enmeshed in technologies, systems, cultures that have been the product of millennia-long civilization-building processes. In particular, over the past several hundred years of intensified civilizational design, the myth of the separate, autonomous individual seeking liberty and happiness has been both the primary design assumption and client. Our task is to let go, not just of these design assumptions, but the project of civilization building itself, to find our way back into the role of participating fully in the aliveness of this wondrous ecological web. Yet, no matter how many times we can impressively slip in the word ontology into our day, during that same day, we will still be silently designed over and over by the technologies and systems that we have surrounded ourselves with. In Good Work, Schumacher describes this trap, saying, quote, "Once a process of technological development has been set in motion, it proceeds largely by its own momentum, irrespective of the intentions of its originators. It demands an appropriate system, for inappropriate systems spell inefficiency and failure." For our community of practitioners working hard towards systems transformation, what wisdom does this hold? Especially knowing that so often our livelihoods are made possible not by demonstrating our inefficiency and failure, but by demonstrating our efficiency and success. How often do we reach to pry open the doors of the systems we are trapped in, yet watch our arms calcify into yet another tangled bar of that cage? Let us humble ourselves. Becoming aware of the myths we critique is not the same as becoming uninvolved in them. Schumacher reminds us that the life and death problems of industrial society lie too deep, in the heart and soul of every one of us. It is there, he says, that the main work of reform has to be done, secretly, unobtrusively. And yet, it is impossible to stop producing new technologies. Like telling stories, it's simply what we do as a human species. It seems Schumacher recognized this as well and saw that the path to betterment lay not with attempts to change the superstructure, its rules, profit motives, agreements, taxes, education, etc., but with technology itself. He says, if there is no change in the base, which is technology, there is unlikely to be any real change in the superstructure. In this perilous historical moment, we believe Schumacher's analysis of technology and his conception of intermediate technology, which later evolved into the term appropriate technology by its adherents, offers us vital guidance. He argued that the dominant technological paradigm of industrial society is fundamentally misaligned with life. He observed that modern technologies, even when successful by their own metrics, tended to embody 4 design principles that not only undermined economic and ecological well-being, but produced a degraded human too. He was concerned by the design principles of gigantism, the assumption that bigger is always better. He was concerned by complexity that outstrips local understanding, capital costliness that concentrates ownership and excludes participation, and violence, meaning modes of production that force their way through natural systems in the conviction that unintended consequences and unforeseen side effects can always be undone by the further application of violence. In contrast, Schumacher proposed technologies that fit the smaller places, technologies that could be owned, understood, built, and repaired locally, and that embodied the reverse design principles of small, simple, non-capital intensive, and non-violent. A principle which we believe Schumacher, if alive today, would agree is embodied through our refusal to act out our myths of separation, act out our myth of away, and the myth that we can harm other beings without simultaneously harming ourselves. In his advocacy for appropriate technology, he was largely focused on the physical, the industrial technology of tools, machinery, chemicals, and hard infrastructure. Now, more than 50 years after his writing, we're compelled to reaffirm his vision for appropriate technology, yet this time encourage a significantly expanded view of technology. Don't the same principles need to apply, not just to machines, but to our social, educational, healing, financial, economic, and spiritual technologies? To the tools, the templates, the rituals, and the ceremonies with which we gather, govern, teach, coordinate, exchange resources, and even contact divinity and emptiness. Aren't all of these producing us too? I'm curious, beyond what is easy to recognize as technology, what are the technologies so ordinary, so commonplace that we cease to see them as technology? Here I'm thinking of the line, the neat, well-mannered queue of first come, first serve, of retirement accounts, of weddings, ceremonies that bind us to another human individual, yet not the lands, waters, and multi-species families that give life to us. I'm thinking of old people's homes. I'm thinking of trash bins, which leverage the disruptive breakthrough of away as an ontological category. Do not all of these and so many more need urgent disruption? With endless realms in which we could innovate more beautiful technologies, how are we going to focus our attention? Well, if we're seeking to actually achieve widespread adoption of appropriate technologies, we might be wise to do what any cunning entrepreneur would do. Develop a forecast of what the demand will be and design something compelling to meet that demand. And if we're in need of a forecast, what about Nate Hagens' view? That, quote, societies need to physically and psychologically prepare for circumstances with less credit, complexity, energy/material throughput, and that they'll need social support structures for those falling off the treadmill. As he says, we will need airbags, social cohesion, and ethos and prepared blueprints based on intelligent and wise foresight. In times of disruption, when the supply chains falter, energy costs spike, and grids sputter off and on, and wild weather drives unprecedented catastrophe, suddenly the world gets a lot smaller. Suddenly the most important things in life become simple logistical questions. Can my hose with clean drinking water reach my flooded neighbors down the hill? Can the food in our regional distribution center reach the families before it rots? How are we going to make a circle big enough to hold all of this grief? Amidst confusion, disruption, and distress, it will be the technologies and systems held by resilient relationships, networks, and organizations that effectively supply the basic needs of food, shelter, water, health, and offer beacons of social and psychological resilience that become most demanded for. The issue is no longer merely what needs doing. The outlines of that are clear. The crucial design questions become, where should this work take place? With whom should it be done? And how should it be carried out? In other words, with what design principles beyond what Schumacher offers, and with what practices to help us fully embody those principles? We believe that bioregions are the right scale, bioregional economies are the right context, and bioregionalism is the right practice for developing and distributing the appropriate technologies that can catch us in periods of disruption and serve as the soil from which life-affirming cultures grow. So let's take a closer look at what we're talking about when we invoke these terms.
Thank you, Tyler. Whew. So how might we tend to this possibility that Tyler is speaking about? If we're going to design appropriate technologies for the future that are not reproducing the conditions of the past, we'll want to orient to this process with as much wisdom as we can gather and as much humble reverence for life as we can muster. We believe that bioregionalism, or what is now popularly being called bioregioning, offers exactly the invitation we need to practice inhabiting a different ontology, worldview, value system, scale of focus, and even relationship to time. And through this practice, we can become different people who create different technologies, giving rise to different cultures, to create a different type of civilization. A little bit about what bioregionalism is before we get into bioregions as the basis for technological development. Bioregionalism is a philosophy, as we understand it, that advocates for societies to be organized around biocultural regions or bioregions, where economic activity, ecological management, and governance align with the region's natural systems and cultures. And bioregions, regions defined by hard lines, soft lines, and human lines, or their physical, ecological, cultural characteristics and the interconnections between these, can be seen as the natural units of place-based regeneration. Let's hear from some of the bioregional elders about how they understand it. Author Judith Plant tells us, simply put, bioregionalism means learning to become native to place, fitting ourselves to a particular place. It is living within the limits and the gifts provided by a place, creating a way of life that can be passed on to future generations. Another author, Mitchell Tomashaw, says bioregionalism emerges as a response to the formidable power relations of global political economy. More than an alternative framework for governance, it represents a profound cultural vision addressing moral, aesthetic, and spiritual concerns. Many bioregionalists who have come before us have suggested bioregionalism is an approach of devolution rather than revolution, that invites us to overgrow rather than overthrow. In his 1983 Schumacher Lecture, Mother of All, Kirkpatrick Sale described bioregionalism as gradualism, steady and continuous, not revolutionary, but aligned with the long and steady tenor of evolution, an approach that, in our view, requires patience and alignment with Earth time rather than the pace at which modernity is running. Some principles of bioregionalism that we are inspired by in our work include alignment with living systems principles and indigenous wisdom, holism in interconnectedness, integration of human and more than human communities, or a return to a kinship ontology, place-based identity and responsibility, local community self-reliance, culture and practices of commoning, regeneration, and stewardship, participatory democracy, democracy much more broadly conceived than the supposed representative democracy that we have in the US today, bioregional cooperative economics, and the application of appropriate technology. And there is so much depth and richness in the decades of work to articulate bioregionalism since it kicked off. Our summary offers only a tiny fraction, and these principles are only a partial guide, but we believe they help orient us towards how we can best show up in this moment in service to life. It's important to say that in our view, bioregionalism could not have erupted into the psyche of 1960s North America without the deep determination of Native peoples on this continent and around the world to persist despite centuries of colonial violence, attempted genocide, and ongoing oppression, to live and openly share the instructions they have been holding for time immemorial. To these communities, the proposition of bioregionalism is nothing new, except perhaps that its underlying ideas are now sometimes ironically communicated in the awkward language of academics who have become abstracted away from the rich tapestry of stories and relations that come from being people of and in service to place. Yet for the minds and bodies that have been trained and forced so deep into the myth of separation, bioregionalism offers something critical, something we think of an ontological, epistemological, and ethical U-turn that arose out of the necessity in the minds and hearts of people embedded deep within modernity, who looked courageously towards its dead-end trajectory and decided it was not for them, decided that we must start to see and design differently. Given that the foundation of bioregionalism is Indigenous ways of knowing, seeing, being, and stewardship, as learned by those who have lost their indigeneity, the ongoing role of Indigenous leadership in this work, including in the creation and revitalization of appropriate technologies, cannot be overstated. Indeed, Indigenous technologies that have lasted are by definition appropriate technologies. Building on the philosophy and frame of bioregionalism is a growing and recently re-energized body of work that is highly relevant to surfing the coming waves of the Great Simplification and responding to the broader meta-crisis. Work we call Bioregional Economics and Bioregional Finance. This is the space we at the BioFi Project have been focused on. Both bioregional economics and bioregional finance advocate for appropriate financial and economic technologies that serve the well-being of all of life in a bioregion. These two fields of work also chart the path to create a wide range of appropriate technologies and generate demand for them by building new appropriate markets. So what might tending to possibility look like?
Before we share our vision, let's have a word about vision itself. What is it, and what does it offer us? As I've learned from nonviolence teacher Mickey Cashton, a very practical visionary, vision is something we can access through the biological memory of ourselves, particularly the memory of being born in a world in which care for life is the foundation of human systems. Amidst so much ugliness in human systems today, being able to access vision provides the energetic pull the courage, the energy to try practical baby steps towards a more beautiful world. And in seeing this world clearly, we can more fully allow ourselves to mourn the gap between here and there. Without this mourning, we can find ourselves numbing our grief and burning out as we chase a rigid fantasy rather than walking the mysterious path ahead in togetherness. So, if you're up for it, I'd like to offer a brief exercise to help us all access the vision living inside of us, perhaps kept alive in the biological memory of ourselves. I know it's a Saturday, but I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of work today. But I hope it actually picks up the energy a little bit. This is our wiggle break. So, if you need to move your body, if you need to stand up, I invite you to do so as long as we keep the silence in this room. I invite you to come into your body in whatever way would allow you to bring back sensation, to let all the words that have washed through start to fall away, and to return your attention to what it feels like to be you in this moment. Use your breath to come back into the tender parts, into the rigid parts, and explore. Could you use a stretch? Could you use a yawn? Could you use a deep breath, a shallow breath? And I invite you to vision with me. As you can, find some stillness. And if it feels right, close your eyes. And tune in to the tender parts of your heart, where there's scratches and tears, where the wisdom is in that heartbreak. Are there whispers in that heartbreak of what it's like to be born into a world in which care for life is the foundation of human systems? Can you begin to imagine what this looks like? What is childbirth like? What is education like? What are the structures and buildings that we live in? How do we feed each other? How do we move throughout our days, our lands? What do we pay attention to? What matters to us? And how do we die? Let yourself sit in this for 10 seconds more. If there's anything remarkable or interesting that came up, maybe note it down and spend some time with it later. Thank you for the courage to try this. I know it's not easy. I know there's real pain here. You can take your seats.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you all. These visions, we believe, are a part of what we are collectively creating in this moment. And now we're going to let you in on what we hear and feel as our vision that guides us in this work. In our listening, we have been hearing of the birth of a future into this present that does not represent a final destination, but rather a future that is dynamic and unfolding with all of life on Earth and all of the cosmos. A future full of harmony and flourishing, but one that still has darkness and suffering. One where we rejoice in what has been created and where we continue to long for something more beautiful so it can keep evolving. It is a future that is more aware, more honest, more alive, more connected, more complex. It's often called a protopian future. For today, we will call it a bioregional future, an unfolding, unending, unknown future full of many futures. It will be a future that thrives on biodiversity of life, cultures, languages, ontologies, cosmologies, ways of being, ways of knowing, ways of serving, ways of governing, and ways of flowing care. A future with its foundation in the bioregional economy and appropriate technology. As the Zapatistas say, in the world we want, everyone fits. In the world we want, many worlds fit. The nation which we construct is one where all communities and all languages fit, where all steps may walk, where all may have laughter, where all may live the dawn. For the Zapatistas, the dawn has represented the emergence of a new and just world beyond the one we occupy today. This is a vision that we share. Now I'm going to move into sharing a more detailed vision for the future that Tyler and I hold, and I want to first acknowledge that this is a result of what we are learning from the relational web of people, the more than human life and spirits that hold us. It has been inspired by our work walking alongside and supporting bioregional teams across the Americas and around the world, working to regenerate the unique bioculture of their places. At the most foundational, palpable, embodied level, we dream of a world in which we regenerate the health of the earth and our bodies, our vital systems of life, in which we work to realize clean and alive air, free-flowing, swimmable rivers and drinkable streams teeming with life, healthy, vibrant soils with thriving mycorrhizal networks, rainbow cornucopias of nutrient-dense, poison-free food that heals bodies and ecosystems and reflects place-specific seasons and bioculture, living, natural, and holistic medicines, local fibers grown regeneratively and returned to the earth without harm, safe, clean shelter built from local, natural, regeneratively grown and harvested materials. Technology that supports us in transparently and continuously monitoring the health of the bioregion and how that health links up with larger Earth systems. To realize this, we will need to create and reconnect with life-aligned cultures that support belonging, flourishing, and resilience. Pathways we see to regenerating life-aligned culture and inner resilience include restoring relationality. This might encompass ceremony and rituals of responsibility that remind us of our interdependence with each other, all the more than human life, and the divine. A way of life that emphasizes slowing down and honoring seasonal rhythms. Practices that shift consciousness and cultivate interpersonal capacities to help humans become a more harmonizing species on Earth. Next, we imagine spaces of resilience and expression. This might include space where rest, contemplation, and stillness are protected, spaces to grieve in community, space for joy, laughter, and celebration, art and beauty for their own sake, valued as essential to community health. It also includes collective care infrastructure, community care for children, elders, and the vulnerable, and community structures that free us from feeling like we carry the weight of the world alone. And critical, in our view, to catalyze the regeneration needed to move towards a healthy earth, healthy bodies, and life-aligned cultures is a bioregional economy. The foundations of a bioregional economy we see include that it centers care and reciprocity, the alignment with living systems, and the cultivation of nonviolence, healing, and liberation for all life in the bioregion. It enables the development of appropriate technology. It embraces simplicity and sufficiency, staying within bioregional carrying capacities while matching each person's gifts to community needs in a spirit of gratitude and reciprocity. It recognizes the rights of nature. It deepens and expands the commons. It is anti-fragile, growing stronger with each coming shock. It works across nested scales, household, local, and bioregional. It invites all its members into responsibility and sacrifice. It also includes the development of local knowledge, building, craft, and medicine, including an education system for all ages tied to place that cultivates ecological literacy, land-based skills, and relational intelligence. Workforce training for building, repair, and maintenance of infrastructure. Workforce training to support the transition to cooperatively owned structures. Reinvigoration of artisanship and craft traditions using local materials. Revitalization of medicine and healing practices focused on root causes and restoring wholeness. The bioregional economy reconnects people to ways of living that regenerate. It reconnects people to flows of care to, from, and as place, and to technologies that enable those flows. It invites us to spiritually, culturally, ecologically, and economically re-inhabit our place and to develop, evolve, and pass on technologies that support us in that. We see the bioregional economy and the regeneration of health and culture connected in a toroidal flow, and that is why we chose a toroid as our logo, to remind us of the flows between the economy and health, culture, and consciousness. The bioregional economy we see exhibits more of the following qualities over time: becoming more circular, local, regional, and sovereign, less dependent on global supply chains, symbiotic in the relationship between rural and urban areas, regenerative, working within and regenerating carrying capacities of the bioregion, regenerating culture. It will be increasingly commons-based and cooperatively owned. It will develop intentionally structured markets while decreasing its dependence on global markets, formal markets altogether, as well as its dependence on fiat currencies and debt. In practice, this often works fractally, developing different appropriate technologies at different levels. At the personal or household scale, these are some of the practices we identified in daily rituals that can help us to develop appropriate technologies. At the community, neighborhood, or small watershed scale, cooperation, stewardship, and shared culture can come alive with some of these practices. At the bioregional scale, we can really start to see more significant impact on Earth systems and human systems through some of these technologies and practices.
There's a reason we start with vision. It provides the energy, or in the language of the Common Land Foundation, the inspirational capital from which subsequent action flows. Yet what do we do when we recognize and mourn the immense gap between here and the vision? That's where strategy comes in, identifying and pursuing opportunities for coordinated investment of time, attention, money, and other resources into creating the appropriate technologies needed in the coming decades. Through the practice of bioregioning, if we release our abstractions of separation and come into intimate contact with ecological reality, we are more likely to develop technologies, be they mechanical, agricultural, energy, financial, economic, social, governance, cultural, or spiritual, that truly fit our places in nonviolent ecological relationship. By embedding these technologies in networks of cooperation now, they will be the ones strengthened and demanded when inappropriate systems fail. As Schumacher said, technology is not simply made by man, but it also makes men. And as Milton Friedman said, only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When the crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. What does this strategy formation process look like? As described in the BioFi book, strong bioregional regeneration strategies emerge when diverse actors devoted to their place come together in relationships of trust and shared bioregional ethos. From those with hands in the dirt planting seeds of possibility to those holding hearts open in ceremony and educational spaces, to those donning a suit and tie to hospice legacy institutions every day. When these actors form a network of collective intelligence, they can share what they're seeing, feeling, and attempting to accomplish, and identify avenues for deeper cooperation and coordination. A thorough bioregional asset mapping process is essential for socializing knowledge about where existing wealth in all of its forms, culture, land, biodiversity, skills, knowledge, and financial capital, can be leveraged. Different people see different needs, opportunities, and technological interventions. This diversity of perspective is critical. Equally important, we believe, is the courageous mapping of risks facing the bioregion. We cannot overstate this. We have surpassed 1.5 degrees of warming and show no signs of stopping. Even if a bioregion is not yet experiencing severe climatic or geopolitical disruption, failures across distant bioregions will eventually arrive in the form of supply chain disruptions and the need to accommodate what is expected to be over 1 billion people fleeing unlivable conditions by 2050. As part of asset and risk mapping, we recommend a material and energy flow baseline analysis to understand where food, water, housing materials, energy, and other essentials come from and where they go. How much waste is generated? What dependencies exist? Where are the opportunities for greater circularity and resilience? As a starting point, we encourage you to take a look at the work of the consulting firm Metabolic, which has done this form of analysis for cities such as Toronto, Charlotte, and Boulder. Finally, any bioregional regeneration strategy should include both declarative plans and principles that support more emergent strategy. Culture isn't created in documents, it is created through ritual and practice. Still, though, articulating the design principles and protocols that a bioregional community of practice wants to be guided by in their coordination and technology design can be grounding and clarifying. So let's now take a closer look at other components that might be included in a bioregional regeneration strategy, such as economic transition pathways.
Out of the bioregional regeneration strategy and asset and risk mapping for a bioregion, we begin to identify transition pathways for particular sectors of the economy and society that we see as catalytic and foundational for a more comprehensive transition to a bioregional economy. Some pathways we recommend as powerful entry points to broader economic transition include the food system, the building system, the energy system, the fiber system, land ownership, education, healthcare, culture, and spirituality, catalyzing bioregional and earth-based spiritual practices. We are seeing a marked shift away from free market globalism toward protectionist nationalism. And in that, we see a huge opportunity for localization in building out bioregional production and cross-bioregional trade, particularly in North America. Out of the bioregional regeneration strategy, we can start to identify relevant tools, interventions, and experiments that can support the transition to the bioregional economy. These might be considered appropriate technologies. I am now going to share some examples of relevant tools, interventions, and experiments. Some of these are things we've created, some we've supported, and others we're just admiring from afar. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, and I will try to go through it rapid fire, so please bear with me. The first one we think is pretty cool is Bioregional Financing Facilities, or BFFs, as we like to call them. Nat spoke a little bit to this in the opening, but BFFs are a new type of financial institution designed to serve the bioregional movement. They aim to drive the decentralization of financial resource governance, the aggregation of synergistic portfolios of projects, and the transition to a bioregional economy, becoming the connective tissue between financial resources and on-the-ground regenerators. They do this by enabling capital raised from a variety of sources to flow to aggregated portfolios of systemically coordinated regenerative projects in rigorously designed, community-determined ways that support emerging bioregional economies that are applying fundamentally different economic logic and value systems, rooted in the uniqueness of place. BFFs apply a wider lens to assessing risk and returns than legacy financial institutions. These are some of the returns they seek to generate. So financial returns are not prioritized over ecological and social returns. We ran a learning and design journey, our BioFi cultivator that Matt spoke to earlier, for BFFs in the first half of this year that included 22 teams from across the Americas. Matt and his colleagues at the Hudson Estuary Resilience Effort went through the cultivator and launched their incredible bioregional fund at the end in June, and there are other colleagues here who participated as well. It's important to note that BFFs are not meant to centralize all investment in a bioregion, but to serve a specific purpose within the funding ecosystem. There are templates for 4 different BFFs laid out in the BioFi book. These templates should be adapted and innovated upon. It's worth noting that we are currently living through the largest wealth transfer in history, as approximately $100 trillion changes hands between now and 2045 in the US, as baby boomers pass on their fortunes, oftentimes to kids with entirely different worldviews and values. BFFs can play a critical role in preparing the soil for this wealth to reach the ground. Yet many of the people best qualified to do the weaving of portfolios for BFFs are critically underfunded, spending their time chasing grants rather than bringing people, projects, and strategies together. We, along with so many other colleagues in this space, highly recommend to wealth holders that one of the biggest investments you can make in early stages of this process is to provide long-term, steady general funding to the people and organizations that are highly trusted in a bioregion to weave together portfolios and patterns of cooperation. There's much more we could say, but we will leave it there for now and invite you to check out the BioFi book, available for free on our website in both English and Spanish, as well as several other guides that we've developed to support this work. Next up, we have bioregional hubs. Bioregional hubs are an amazing appropriate technology. They are community-led institutions that function as a gathering place, resource center, and facilitator of various regeneration-aligned activities, initiatives, networks within a bioregion. They play a critical role in facilitating the flow of multiple forms of capital in the bioregion. They cohere and strengthen a synergistic bioregional collaboration network by building culture, fostering connections and partnerships, and catalyzing projects and initiatives that align with the regeneration strategy. Next, we have commitment pooling and mutual credit. This can be an incredible complement to a BFF, helping communities to tap into the assets they have already and facilitate robust flow of goods and services without dependence on money. We recommend the excellent work of Will Ruddick of Grassroots Economics, who makes clear the importance of social technologies that generate and sustain a culture of commitments to community and the efficacy of mutual credit systems. Alternative currencies. We are so excited to be in the Berkshires and to get to use Berkshires while we are here. There are a range of inspiring local currency projects around the world that we're following, and we would like to see these more deeply integrated into bioregional economic transition strategies, and would love to be a part of this work. Local currencies can be connected to bioregional regeneration credits or eco-credits. And we are lucky to be supporting 2 incredible biocultural regeneration credit projects with 2 separate multi-tribal indigenous alliances. The Jaguar Biocultural Credit Program in the Amazon Headwaters, led by our friends at Regen Network and the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, and the Salmon Biocultural Credit, which is emerging in British Columbia, led by a BFF that came out of the cultivator called Salmon Returns. Both of these programs aim to compensate Indigenous communities for their biocultural stewardship and regeneration. Community land trusts, legal structures that allow for sovereign land, and Indigenous land return programs are all critical appropriate technologies. I'll quickly show this quote from Peter Berg, where he reminds us of the importance of re-inhabiting the land. I know this audience is well aware of the significant need for land rights and land access reform. And Susan and the Schumacher team have done such incredible work over the last 4+ decades, supporting the transition of land to community ownership, a valuable technology for people everywhere. More recently, our colleague Jennifer Menke, who's also gone through our cultivator program, has been working with a team called Sacred Contract that is supporting the liberation of land from human ownership, using a legal structure that enables the more than human inhabitants of the land to own itself and to begin to break the paradigm of human domination over nature. Jennifer and team recently supported Pyramid Mountain in southwestern Colorado to become the first sovereign mountain in North America, and are looking at working bioregionally across that region and creating a BFF to support its ongoing regeneration. A technology we're really excited about and are looking for the right place to try is a special economic zone called a regenerative economic zone that operates under a customized place-based regulatory framework within a host jurisdiction, granting it special permissions and governance powers to enable regenerative and life-aligned economic activity. There aren't any applications of this approach yet that we are aware of, but we're interested in experimenting with this in the right place. And our colleagues at Sane Futures wrote an excellent paper on this on their website if you want to check it out. Cooperative ownership structures. At a high level, we know we need to shift ownership of our core services and infrastructure to cooperative ownership to prepare for the great simplification. There's so much good work out there supporting the development of co-ops and bringing co-ops together in solidarity. But I am sure we all agree there's more room to realize the power of this technology as we engage in economic transition. The Center for Economic Democracy is doing some great work on this in this bioregion, including supply chain mapping for co-ops. Which connects to the next tool, import replacement, which can help to build solidarity between life-aligned organizations in a bioregion as well as between bioregions. Incredible mutual aid networks. The more disasters we face, the more we realize what an appropriate technology these have been and will continue to be. Mutual aid networks have been so many things in so many places. They provide disaster response, grassroots healthcare and insurance, and adaptive support. They're also engines of joy and cultural resilience. We've been inspired by the social aid and pleasure clubs in my hometown of New Orleans that turned celebration itself into a forum of solidarity, healing, and collective power. We've also seen how amazing mutual aid and cooperative organizations like Cooperate WNC in Western North Carolina are creating and serving as appropriate technology. When Hurricane Helene hit, they were positioned as prepared community leaders who were able to get to work, meet the demand for their services, and educate others about the technologies they were stewarding. And that demand has sustained post-disaster.
One more. What I call gift economy hubs. As Robin Wall Kimmerer has shared so compellingly in her book, The Serviceberry, nature's gift economy is already operating all around us, including the way many of us give and receive freely with others with no expectation of return. Gift hubs can serve as local practice spaces where we can relax our cultural norms of transactionalism, valuation, and simply practice meeting needs. There's a really cool conference coming up in a week from now that I encourage you all to check out with Sherry Mitchell, Mickey Cashton, Pat McCabe, Darcia Narvarez, and Genevieve Vaughn on the maternal gift economy movement. Now, there's one more area that we want to bring attention to. In the realms of social, economic, financial, and governance technology, we must face the sad truth that humanity's muscles for pro-social cooperation, our capacity to face life's risks and interdependence, have significantly atrophied. Colonialism and neoliberalism have violently attacked the commons and the cultural practices of commoning that sustain them for millennia. In their place, modernity drives us towards its crowning achievement of a successful life.
Accumulating enough money, what Wiki Cashton calls a non-consensual claim on the Earth's resources, to retire worry-free by exiting shared whiz with all other humans and the web of life at Atari. These torn and weakened muscles of collaboration need tender care. We must attend to our intergenerational trauma, including the wounds that pit communities against each other and the wounds around money itself. We must create healing, educational spaces that help children and adults alike cultivate skills of nonviolence, cooperation, and compassion. The Maternal Gift Economy and the Global Nonviolent Liberation Communities Deaccumulation Lab offer an inspiring vision and practice context where individuals and groups can discover the fears, beliefs, and wounds that disrupt our capacity to simply flow resources towards needs in reverence for and trust and length.
As we've experienced today, you're wealthy in inspirational vision and case studies from specific projects, often at the edge of the mainstream, or what is visible to most people. However, we have yet to see whole bioregional economies in the global north successfully demonstrating a comprehensive and densely networked application of these visions and technologies. We need this work going on in every bioregion all at once, and for bioregional economies and appropriate technology to gain deep adoption, we believe there is a need to focus on a set of specific connected places to collaboratively support diverse and synergistic experimentation, document and evaluate these experiments, and tell coherent and powerful stories about the results and emergent potential. This is what we're excited to be a part of during the next segment of our BioFi journey. One of the bioregions we're excited to deepen in is this one. The amazing Berkshires and the Hudson Estuary are so near and dear to our hearts. We're so grateful to have Susan, Nat, Alex, Chris, David, and the whole Schumacher team, and so many of you here today as collaborators, and we are looking forward to engaging more deeply in this work in 2026. Now, let's bring this Rumai to a close.
We believe bioregions are the right scale, bioregional economies are the right context, and bioregionalism is the right practice for developing and distributing the appropriate technologies that can catch its in periods of disruption and serve as a soil for which life-affirming cultures grow. Our relationships with these technologies and their relationships with each other will form the fabric of our experience and what we phenomenologically experience to be extensions of our minds and our physical bodies. They will make us. So let us be careful. Let us be very careful not to assume we have the design blueprints all figured out, especially those of us who may have found success and esteem in this life by efficiently wielding the technologies of modernity. In the intensity of these times and in the urgency of justice, let us be careful to not force our particular visions onto the world. Let us not close the doors to the mysterious, unfamiliar, and unintelligible futures that are whispered to us in unfamiliar tones, rhythms, and languages. Rather, may we tend to possibility together. We'll close this afternoon with a poem from Nora Meets. It's called Tone. When culture is disassembling, it is also reassembling. The tone, the aesthetic, the language, and mutual care is what will form and inform the connective tissue of the new Lincolns. The tone matters. Kindness is a tone. Thank you, Wisconsin.
I am going to start with a question that I prepared so that I can take some more time to read these very thoughtfully laid out. But thank you, everyone, for integrating your thoughts. And one of the practices that we've developed over the years is actually to share the questions with the speakers at the end. So even if we don't get a chance in the time we have to specifically raise the question that you have raised, I think it's meaningful to hear as a speaker what resonated in the audience and what questions may be in the minds of people. So we'll make sure to share these at the end. First, Samantha and Tyler, I just want to say how beautiful that was. It was soulful and profound and moving, I'm sure, for everyone. So I just want to say thank you again for bringing us into this vision. I was hiking with my son last week near here, and we were in the woods, and we discovered a new trail that had opened up in the woods. And he pulled my sleeve and surprised me when he said that he felt sorry that the new trail had opened. Because he said maybe it would be better to let the woods be alone and not to let the humans spoil it. And it broke my heart a little bit because I feel perhaps that he's been absorbing some of the worries and concerns that we discuss. And at the same time, I have to admit that part of my heart has wondered the same thing in recent years. Would the world be better off without us? Tyler, the slides that you took us through, the graphs at the beginning, can lead to that question, my gosh. So in the midst of this growing sense of despair around the harm done to our world and the consequences we'll face, one of the things that I note about bioregioning and bioregional thinking is that it affirms human culture as an expression of nature itself. And Samantha, I've actually heard you speak about humans as a keystone species. So this is more than a just do less harm strategy. It is not a leave no trace approach. I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about this idea of what it means to see humans as a keystone species. What is the net positive vision that we can inhabit as we accept this invitation to re-inhabit our place? I think you are amplified already.
Are we? Okay. Go first?
Sure, I can say some things. Yeah, lovely question. Thank you. It's a spiritual question. It's a metaphysical question. a story that helps bring me some clarity is that, up there I was talking a lot about the myth of separation. But there's a view in which cosmos and evolution and the evolution of consciousness itself is an oscillation and is a gradual complexifying, where there are moments where at a certain order of complexity, consciousness is able to recognize itself and look back on itself, and it needs that movement of separation to first make that move. And so if we want to play in those realms of consciousness thinking and kind of spiritual realms, perhaps humanity needed to go on this journey to develop the intentional holding of its capacity to become separate so as to come back into harmonic relationship with what's going on. So that's a story that I hold that gives me some solace. There's so many other stories about, if we take the frame of Gaia and this earth being a wise mother, that mistakes are not made. And so I have friends and family members who are also struggling in this time, and younger folks who look at the world and are part of that graph that we saw. And I think it's our task to embody ourselves for them, that we see that there's a role we can play and that can be joyful, and that the forest misses us when we leave it aside. And for millennia, we were in community with those forests, and they weren't just left alone as places that humans avoided. There is a song that we sing that helps the birds and helps the trees and helps that ecosystem offer greater beauty. So those are my poetics, those are my stories.
Thank you for that. I'm seeing a thread in the questions that have come up about the tension with the world of legacy institutions. Samantha, I think you used that phrase, and I'm curious if I run an organization called Rising Tide Capital, and that word capital has always been a tense and tender word to figure out how to hold. And I'm curious, as I read through these questions about, well, how is it about redeeming the legacy systems? Is it about replacing the legacy systems? You talked about overgrowing instead of overthrowing. But is there, I'm curious, even in the world of bioregional finance, is there a new meaning for the concept of capital itself? Is capital a neutral term that just has to be wielded in the right way? How do you navigate these boundary zones between legacy systems and these new technologies that you so beautifully evoked?
It's a good question. I can kick us off and you can add. The way that we're approaching it is that we're very inspired by Buckminster Fuller and his work, and I didn't include that quote from him because I know we've all heard it a million times, but we are working from a theory of change where we're building a new system that makes the old system obsolete. And these new institutions that we're building, as Tyler spoke to so articulately, have different culture, have different protocols for how they work. They have different ontologies embedded in how they're structured and how they work with capital and how they work with people. And we believe that that basis for creating an institution will inform the impact that it creates in the world. And so you built a beautiful bioregional financing facility. How do you realize it? You have to interact with legacy institutions, with wealth holders that got that wealth, likely in a way that is not regenerative. And we see bioregional financing facilities in particular as creating sort of a membrane through which, once capital passes, it serves regenerative purposes, and it's almost like a way to compost capital. And then I think you get to the question of, like, what is the theory of value that the bioregional financing facility is holding? Is it holding the same theory of value as the capital holder that gave a donation to the bioregional financing facility or made an investment? And what I am suggesting in the Bioregional Financing Facilities book is that they take a wider scope to how they look at risks and returns. And of course, legacy financial institutions have a very narrow band that they consider risks and returns as relevant to. And bioregional financing facilities can take a much longer term perspective. They can do this systemic risk modeling. They can look at avoided costs from investing in regeneration in the biosphere and see that is a real return that's worth investing in. But then they also pay attention to social and ecological returns beyond financial returns. So there's kind of a different program that a bioregional financing facility is operating under, but capital is critical lifeblood to all of the projects in the bioregion, and we need it. And we say at the end of the Bioregional Financing Facilities book that we are interested in creating bioregional economies that are less dependent on external capital and capital altogether over time. Tyler's a deep scholar of the gift economy and the maternal gift economy, and he loves gift and somehow, seems to manifest amazing gifts, which is great. And so the work that bioregional financing facilities do, we hope can catalyze a lot more non-market transactions where capital is not so central in the economy, but as a starting place, you really need it to get some of these technologies going. Anything you would add on that?
Beautiful. One of the themes that I see coming up has to do, Tyler, you spoke about the collective atrophy of our commenting skills and our ability to collaborate. And I was having dinner recently with a friend and a colleague who was saying that the humbling thing about this work is that it's not that the work itself is hard, but getting along is hard. And getting along enough to be able to figure out how to collaborate. In this time of rising authoritarianism and the risks to democracy, Tyler, you've spoken about intimacy as a core value. And I'm curious, the context of working in a bioregioning way, does that represent somehow a fundamental context shift that enables us to get along more easily? Or is there something about the strategies itself that we must pursue that has to take this into account? Is there anything you can point to?
Great question. Yeah, no, I love it. I do think there is something quite supportive when we head into attempts at cooperation that the bioregioning frame offers us. I think it offers us humility. I think it offers us a chance to decenter ourselves, our lived experiences as humans, as part of a much wider web of relations. And it can decenter the what in that argument, in that attempt to come to an agreement, feels like the most important thing on planet Earth. It can help decenter that and get us more curious about what are all the ecologies of relationships that gave rise to the views I'm holding right now in this space. And I also think, I often like to hold bioregioning as a practice of attuning to the needs of place. And some of those needs are more than human, and many of those needs are human. And here, kind of inspired by the maternal gift economy frame and the practices of nonviolent communication, orienting to needs rather than getting attached to strategies and opinions about how best to meet those, I think can be tremendously supportive in these conversations. So I think it helps. It definitely doesn't solve the issues. We're still humans, we're still wounded, we've still lost a lot of these skills. But my sense and my prayer is that when we're able to hold a frame much larger and much more mysterious beyond ourselves, that allows for some reverence, some trust in life that can create a little bit of spaciousness in those conversations.
I would add that there's no better time than the present to learn to collaborate and get along with people. And so I feel like in a bioregional frame, we can keep reminding each other of that we're going to need to strengthen those muscles so that we can collaborate when the stakes are much higher in the event of disasters and systems break down. And so we need to do that work now.
And one more tiny bit on that, there's lots of literature around how sometimes people's most enjoyable or meaningful experiences in their life have come when disaster struck their community. And finally, they had tribe, finally they had purpose, and they saw that the neighbors that they hadn't talked to in decades were the people that they were working hand in hand with to remove, trees from the road and whatnot and get people food and water. So we have these skills, they're in our DNA, but the ideas, the frames, the conceptions, the ontologies that we've been trained in often block us from accessing them. And when life's needs make themselves presented to us, oftentimes the clarity can come. But yeah, there's a ton that needs to be worked on.
I loved how you brought up the concept of anti-fragile in your talk, and that speaks to what it means to build the capacity for resilience, collective resilience in these times. There is a dimension of the interest in gift economies. There's this tension around quantification that comes up. And especially when you start getting into the realm of finance, there is a question where on one side, I could imagine a skeptical world banker saying, is this just a fancy way of repackaging concessionary capital and philanthropy, using big words? On the other side, there's the risk of co-opting the concept and the movement and greenwashing it and making it subservient to an eco-modernist dream. I wonder, as you both are navigating this large work, these different forces that are going to be pushing and pulling on this idea, how do you respond to the threats on both sides, either the dismissal or the cynical kind of co-optation of it?
Yeah, I think what is different about bioregional financing facilities than just a kind of like conventional nonprofit, it's not just a new brand, but it is this long-term planning and often a bioregional frame or a multi-species frame that we're taking as we're developing portfolios of projects. So it's kind of a multi-species, multi-generational view that we're bringing to portfolio development. And then there's a systems design layer as well. And few nonprofits that I've worked with are designing their portfolios from that perspective. And what bioregional financing facilities do beyond just providing grants is they can take in blended finance and they can offer blended finance to the projects that are in their portfolios. And the vision with all the bioregional financing facilities that we're working with is to use philanthropic capital to be catalytic to tap into larger pools of capital once that philanthropic capital runs out. So that looks very different in North America than in South America. So we're working with the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, and for them, it's about raising that initial philanthropic capital to get their fund designed, develop really robust monitoring, evaluation, and learning systems and indigenous-led governance, and to be ready to take in multilateral capital from the Tropical Forest Forever facility or the Kali Fund, these big multilateral funds that are coming online that often have mandates to give a certain percentage of their funding to Indigenous peoples. But if Indigenous peoples don't have the containers to receive them and the governance and reporting structure to be able to meet the qualifications of those, the money doesn't flow. In North America, it's much more about using philanthropic capital to support the development of regenerative enterprises and to tap into return-generating impact investment capital. But I really think bioregional financing facilities operating in this kind of in-between space where they can be deeply purpose-driven and thoughtful and use different forms of capital to support different activities in the bioregion in line with a long-term strategy is unique. Do you want to say anything about the risk of co-optation?
I want to add, I might try to get to that. I want to say that I think there's three potential, there's so many perspectives, but three perspectives on this I see. One is a justice orientation. And from that, we can see hundreds of years of wealth extraction from the global south into the global north. Those terms are fraught, but we can use them for now. And so that offers a particular lens with how we work in the context of the global south versus the global north. The justice frame isn't always what convinces wealth holders or investors to invest, and that's the world we live in. And so then there's a practical strategic frame of, for urgent work, what are the boundary protocols these bioregional financing facilities are going to put in place that creates that membrane that Samantha was speaking to. And one of the principles that's articulated as a key attribute of bioregional financing facilities in the book is work with values-aligned funders and investors. And that's a relational process. That is humans to humans, building trust, building a sense that we share a vision, we share values, we share an ontology perhaps. And oftentimes those are people who are in those institutions looking around and seeing how they're trapped in those institutions too. And they're trying to squeeze a little bit of room here and there. And so there's a lot more cooperation potential than I think cynics often think. I think it's very easy to brand these institutions as full of people that have poor moral quality. And I think there's so many beautiful people donning suit and ties every day in these institutions trying to find a little space and room. So it's about developing those personal relationships. And then lastly, there's the ecological perspective. If we're trying to grow a food forest or a farm in degraded soil, we're going to want to build that soil. We're not going to want to extract the first crop we possibly can as quickly as we can. So it's context dependent there too. There's places that have an abundance of capital being generated that can flow back to investors. And ideally then we again apply that justice frame and think, why is there so much capital here? Where else might that be needed?
We have time for one last question. And I am so glad to share these. Just beautiful questions, everyone. Thank you so much. There's a theme running through around governance, and it's a word that you just used, Samantha. A few years back, Anand Giridharadas wrote a book called Winners Take All, and wrote about the sometimes inadvertent or thoughtless diversion of energy and engagement away from existing democratic systems in local governments, and basically put a challenge out to the social space saying, if you aren't working to support the operations and the impact of local governments, that you may be inadvertently undermining democracy and playing into the neoliberal kind of mythology of needing to shrink government so that you could drown it in a bathtub. I'm curious, because bioregional boundaries, almost by definition, cross the artificial political boundaries that we've organized around, how do we direct and channel the bioregioning movement in ways that can strengthen the already existing democratic systems we have in this time of great peril?
Oh, that's a big one. You want to start on that?
I can try. Yeah, wonderful question. Great questions, everyone. I don't know. I know there are bioregionalists within all sorts of local, state, and federal governments. I know that there's some states who are even adopting that term in how they do planning. And I know that there are also some governments and institutions that are entirely bought by powerful interests. And so I don't know. I think it's highly context specific, as I think is the easy answer to all your questions.
It depends.
It depends, yeah. But I think that's a very valid concern to be aware of. And I think there is a naivete that can creep into the bioregional movement of thinking that there's no reason to engage the state, there's no reason to engage the existing political systems. And I think there's actually so much opportunity there, and want to uplift the work that David Bollier and colleagues have been doing, really thinking through and showing examples of what they call commons public partnerships. So as bioregional processes or co-ops or communities of entrepreneurs find ways to actually offer community value through a commons approach, how can they then relate to government who maybe used to provide those services or no longer has funding to provide those services, to strengthen that relationship and really empower that commons to offer itself to the community in a legitimized way that takes burden off of local government too.
Yeah, I'll just build to say that I echo what Tyler said, that bioregional organizing can often have like more energy, more appeal than engaging with local government, right? Like there's this bureaucracy that people are allergic to. And as local government is really struggling to get people engaged, and we have to do large scale regeneration, that's gonna take a lot of shovels, a lot of hands. And to the extent that the folks leading bioregional organizing efforts can bring along local governments as allies, whether through funding or using their spaces, I think there's a really powerful partnership there. And one of the teams that went through the Cultivator has been working with their local government in a county in California, in West Sonoma County. We've also had the governor's office in California reaching out to us. They're doing their climate assessment plan and are wanting to do some bioregional planning. I think that's more from like an ecological perspective, but there's perhaps potential that some of that money could flow to these local teams over time. And in Montana, there's a group coming together using participatory democracy tools, working with Audrey Tang actually, in several counties along a watershed. So it's like, I wouldn't call it quite a bioregional boundary. It's like still using political boundaries, but it's like a hybrid of bioregional and political boundaries to advocate for specific things to those specific representatives. So I think there's something in that juicy middle that we need to be paying attention to.
Excellent, excellent. Samantha, Tyler, I want to thank you. We all want to thank you for sharing your heart and your inspiration with us today. Thank you for being here. Let's give them a round of applause.